Beneath our feet lie entire worlds built for the end of days. We are about to journey into 20 massive underground cities, forgotten masterpieces of survival carved from solid rock. By the end of this exploration, you will see human history through an entirely new lens, discovering how ancient civilizations engineered their own salvation in the face of unimaginable threats. What drove thousands to willingly abandon the sun for a life in perpetual darkness, and what profound secrets did they bury with them when they finally left? How does the silent ingenuity of these stone fortresses speak to our own uncertain future? The answers lie in the depths, waiting to challenge everything you thought you knew about our past. What does true resilience look like when a society's only refuge is the earth itself? The decision to retreat into the earth is never made lightly. It represents a final, monumental gamble, a complete reorientation of human life away from the open sky. Across continents and millennia, this same desperate blueprint emerges whenever the surface world becomes intolerably hostile. The catalysts are written in stone and story: a sudden, crushing ice age that turns fertile land to tundra, the relentless tremors of a shifting continent, or the decades-long shadow of an invading army that makes above-ground existence impossible. Faced with such existential pressures, our ancestors did not merely hide in caves. They engineered them. They transformed the bedrock beneath their feet into a complex, life-sustaining fortress, choosing a managed darkness over a certain end. This shift required more than just physical labor. It demanded a profound psychological leap: to commit to a world without sunrise, to raise children by lamplight, to structure an entire society around the rhythms of a sealed cavern. This is the ultimate expression of long-term planning. Archaeologists note that these were not panic shelters built in a season, but deliberate, multi-generational projects. Communities invested the labor of grandparents for the survival of great-grandchildren, carving out safety one stone at a time. This collective foresight, this willingness to sacrifice for a future they might never see, challenges our modern notions of crisis response. It speaks to a deep, ingrained relationship with a perilous world, where the earth itself was not just a home, but the only reliable ally. Understanding this universal impulse is the key that unlocks the true significance of each incredible city we are about to explore. The term underground city is often used loosely, but the structures we are exploring represent something far more profound. To qualify for our journey, a site must transcend the simple notion of a hideout. It must be a fully realized subterranean civilization. Picture not a single cramped tunnel, but a vast, multi-level metropolis meticulously carved from the living rock. These were environments engineered for permanence. Archaeologists identify them by their sophisticated infrastructure, features that echo the needs of any thriving town on the surface. Deep, hand-dug wells tapped into hidden aquifers for a secure water supply. Ingenious ventilation shafts, sometimes stretching dozens of meters upward, exchanged stale air for fresh, preventing the atmosphere from becoming toxic. There were stables for livestock, communal kitchens with carved hearths, sprawling storage chambers for grain and oil, and dedicated spaces for spiritual practice. This level of planning reveals a startling truth. These were not built for a fleeting emergency. They were designed as long-term alternatives to surface life, capable of sustaining entire communities of thousands for months or even years. The engineering itself is a silent testament to this intent. Builders understood load-bearing principles, carving arches and pillars to support ceilings across vast chambers, preventing catastrophic collapse. They devised methods for managing waste and maintaining stable temperatures, transforming inhospitable geology into a controlled, habitable space. The key distinction, then, lies in both scale and vision. A cave shelter is a reaction. An underground city is a deliberate, monumental act of societal preservation. It is the ultimate backup plan, etched in stone. As we move from one incredible sight to the next, hold this definition in your mind. It will allow you to see beyond the impressive holes in the ground and recognize the breathtaking ambition of people who chose to remake their world from the inside out. Deep beneath the fairy chimneys and wind-sculpted valleys of Cappadocia lies a different kind of wonder, one born from necessity rather than nature's artistry. Derinkuyu is not just a hole in the ground. It is a vertical metropolis carved with astonishing precision into the region's soft volcanic tuff. To stand at its entrance is to stand at the mouth of an 18-story building, but one that descends into the eternal coolness of the earth instead of rising toward the sky. Reaching a depth of about 85 meters, this labyrinth was engineered to sustain an entire community in isolation. Its scale is almost incomprehensible, with space for as many as 20,000 individuals, a number that rivals many ancient surface cities. But this was not merely a cavern for people, it was a sealed ecosystem. Separate levels housed livestock, their warmth helping to regulate temperature, while vast granaries and cisterns held the supplies needed to outlast a siege that could last for months. The air, surprisingly fresh even today, is circulated through more than 50 distinct ventilation shafts, each a marvel of pre-industrial engineering that kept the atmosphere breathable for those living in the deepest chambers. The true genius of Derinkuyu, however, lies in its defensive details. The passageways are narrow and low, forcing any potential intruder to proceed single file and hunched over at a severe disadvantage. At critical junctions, massive, millstone-shaped doors, each weighing several hundred kilograms, could be rolled into place from the inside, sealing off entire sections of the city. These are not mere barriers, they are the final, definitive answer to a threat from above. What kind of world drives people to perfect such an elaborate system of closure? Historical records and the layers of construction tell a story of prolonged insecurity. Initially carved by the Phrygians nearly 3,000 years ago, the complex was dramatically expanded centuries later by early Christian communities. For them, the surface was a landscape of conflict, a place where faith could make one a target. In response, they dug deeper, adding chapels for worship, baptismal fonts, and even wineries and olive presses. This was a society determined not just to survive, but to preserve the full fabric of their culture, their spirituality, their community, their daily rituals, all within the protective embrace of the stone. Derinkuyu's most haunting feature might be its connections. It is not a solitary refuge but part of a vast, hidden network. Tunnels stretch for kilometers, linking it to other underground cities in the region, creating a subterranean highway system that allowed for movement, communication, and escape without ever breaching the surface. This reveals a staggering level of regional cooperation and long-term strategic thinking. The cataclysm they prepared for was not a sudden earthquake or a volcanic eruption, but a persistent, human-made danger, the relentless pressure of invasion and persecution. Their solution was to invert their world. Streets became staircases, town squares became central courtyards buried under a mountain of rock, and the horizon was defined by the reach of a lamplight rather than the setting sun. Derinkuyu stands as the archetype, a complete blueprint for subterranean survival. It challenges us to reconsider what a city truly is, proving that a community's heart can beat strongest in the deepest dark. If this is what one civilization achieved in stone, what other depths of ingenuity remain hidden, waiting to reshape our understanding of the ancient world? Just a few kilometers from Derinkuyu, the stone tells a different story of survival. Kaymaklı, another titan of the Cappadocian underworld, reveals a distinct architectural philosophy. Where its neighbor plunged dramatically downward, Kaymaklı chose to sprawl. Its 8 excavated levels spread wide, a horizontal labyrinth organized with a different kind of logic. The heart of this underground settlement is not a grand staircase, but its massive ventilation shafts. These crucial lifelines, some wide enough to walk around, served as central courtyards in this sunless world. Living quarters, storerooms, wineries, and even small churches radiate outward from these airy cores like neighborhoods branching from a town square. This layout speaks volumes. Archaeologists studying the floor plans see the blueprint of a deeply communal society. Spaces were carved not for solitary refuge, but for large, extended family groups. Rooms interconnect, sharing common areas and passages, suggesting a culture where privacy was secondary to collective security and efficient use of every cubic meter of carved rock. The cataclysm they guarded against mirrored that of Derinkuyu, the ever-present threat of raids and religious persecution that swept across the region for centuries. Yet Kaymaklı's most profound secret is not contained within its own walls. This city was not an isolated fortress. It was a hub. Deep within its lowest levels, passages branch off into the darkness, tunnels that stretch for miles, connecting it to other underground settlements, including its famous neighbor. This changes everything. It transforms our understanding from one of isolated, desperate hideouts to a coordinated, regional defense system. Imagine a subterranean highway, a network of secret roads that allowed entire populations to shift, communicate, and reinforce one another without ever seeing daylight. This raises a staggering possibility. Were these individual cities, or were they provinces of a single, dispersed, subterranean nation? The scale of cooperation required to plan, excavate, and maintain such a network is almost beyond comprehension. It suggests a shared identity forged not under the sun, but in the shared resolve of the deep earth. This interconnected world hints at a social contract written in stone, a silent agreement among thousands to link their fates and their futures in the darkness. If one refuge was compromised, the community could flow like water through the rock to another. This transforms the narrative from mere hiding to a dynamic, strategic hold on existence. The true cataclysm they faced was not a single event, but a prolonged season of uncertainty on the surface, and their response was to build an entire alternative geography beneath it. What does such a network imply about their communication, their governance, their shared identity? The tunnels are quiet now, but they echo with the profound truth that in the face of a shattered world, our ancestors did not just dig holes. They wove a new one together, stone by stone, into a tapestry of collective resilience. The soft, white chalk of northern France holds a different kind of memory. Far from the volcanic rock of Cappadocia, the underground city of Naours is a labyrinth of quiet corridors and rounded chambers, a 3-kilometer network containing 300 rooms. Its story begins not as a fortress but as a source of material. In the Roman era, this was simply a quarry, where workers extracted the fine chalk used to build the world above. Yet, as the centuries turned and the surface grew turbulent, the purpose of these empty spaces was utterly reimagined. The cataclysm here had a distinctly human origin, the relentless, grinding conflict of the 100 Years' War and the waves of invasion that swept across the region. For the local villagers, the open fields and stone houses of their town were no longer safe. So they looked to the hollows beneath their feet. They expanded the old quarry tunnels, transforming them into a hidden sanctuary capable of sheltering over 3,000 people along with their livestock and vital supplies. The softness of the chalk, so different from hard rock, allowed for a surprising level of detail. Artisans carved out a fully realized underground chapel complete with altars and pews, a sacred space to seek solace during times of profound fear. They created stables with tethering rings cut directly into the walls and vast storage galleries to preserve food for the long sieges they anticipated. This was not a temporary bolt hole. It was a mirrored village, a complete inversion of daily life designed to preserve an entire community's social and spiritual structure. What is perhaps most striking about Naours is how its story did not end in the Middle Ages. This subterranean space, born from medieval conflict, found new purpose in the modern era. Centuries later, during the immense hardships of World War I, the tunnels were used again, this time by soldiers seeking respite from the artillery barrages that defined a new, industrial kind of warfare. This continuity is a powerful reminder. It shows that the impulse to retreat into the earth is not a relic of a distant, primitive past, but a recurring human response to prolonged insecurity. Naours stands as a quiet testament to a simple, sobering truth. When the world above becomes a landscape of conflict, the ground below can become the only canvas left for peace, a sanctuary whose usefulness echoes across 1,000 years. If chalk can hold such enduring stories of refuge, what other materials in other lands have been shaped by the same universal need for safety? The miners of Wieliczka did not just extract a precious resource, they built a kingdom from it. Deep beneath the Polish town of Bochnia, this is not a city carved from rock or chalk, but from solid salt, a glittering empire that descends over 300 meters through 9 labyrinthine levels. For over 7 centuries, this was the economic heart of the region, a place of grueling labor where men spent their lives in the eternal dark, hewing the white gold that funded empires and built cities above. Yet within this harsh industrial reality, something extraordinary and deeply human took root. The cataclysm here was twofold. On the surface, it was the relentless churn of political turmoil, the invasions and conflicts that swept across Central Europe, making the world above a perilous place. Below, the constant, terrifying threat was the mountain itself, the ever-present risk of a collapse that could entomb hundreds in an instant. To counter this, the miners developed an engineering marvel, a forest of wooden support structures that held back the crushing weight of the earth, creating vast, stable chambers. It was within these secured spaces that the mine's second life began. The workers, perhaps seeking solace from the danger and darkness, began to sculpt. Using only their tools and an immense, patient artistry, they transformed the salt rock into a breathtaking subterranean cathedral. They carved elaborate chapels with intricate altarpieces, life-sized statues of saints and kings, and even vast chandeliers, their crystals painstakingly faceted from salt. They excavated cavernous halls and serene underground lakes that reflected the glow of their lamps. This was no mere hiding place. It was a place of worship, community, and stunning beauty, hidden 100 meters below the strife of the surface world. During times of war, these deep chambers offered more than just physical protection. Their remarkably stable microclimate, consistently cool and dry, became a perfect natural vault. Precious state treasures, archival documents, and vital food supplies were hidden here, preserved by the salt air from the decay and destruction above. Wieliczka masterfully blurs every line we try to draw. It was an industrial complex, a sanctuary, an art gallery, and a strategic vault. It challenges the assumption that underground survival was a grim, purely utilitarian existence. The miners' drive to create such profound beauty in the most functional of spaces speaks to a universal human truth. Even in the depths, surrounded by toil and danger, the spirit reaches for meaning, for the sublime. They did not just endure the darkness, they chose to illuminate it, crafting a legacy from salt that shines far brighter than any economic ledger. This raises a compelling question. If a salt mine could become a cathedral, what other hidden depths of human creativity are waiting to be uncovered in the most unexpected places? High on its volcanic cliff, the city of Orvieto presents a perfect medieval silhouette to the world. But its true strength lies in what it conceals. Beneath the cobblestone piazzas and towering cathedral, A second, inverted city sprawls through the soft, tough rock, a labyrinth of over 1,200 tunnels, cellars, and chambers carved across 2.5 millennia. This is not a single project, but a living archive of fear and ingenuity, layer upon layer of excavation telling a continuous story of siege. The first cuts were made by the Etruscans, who prized the cliff for its defensibility and began digging deep wells to secure a water supply that could not be easily poisoned or cut off by an enemy. Centuries later, medieval residents faced the same existential threat, the prolonged military blockade. Their response was to expand the ancient tunnels into a secret network of escape routes, hidden granaries, and olive press rooms, creating a subterranean life support system that could sustain the city for months while its gates remained sealed. The cataclysm here was not a natural disaster, but the ever-present shadow of war on the horizon, a reality that demanded a permanent, hidden infrastructure for resilience. This logistical genius is epitomized by one stunning structure, the Pozzo di San Patrizio, or St. Patrick's Well. Commissioned in the 16th century, it is a masterpiece of pragmatic design. Two entirely separate spiral staircases, one for descent and one for ascent, corkscrew down the 62-meter shaft without ever intersecting. This allowed donkey trains to carry empty vessels down to the water table and return laden full, an uninterrupted circuit that turned the critical act of water collection into an efficient, collision-free assembly line. The well is a powerful symbol of Orvieto's entire underground philosophy. Every tunnel, every hidden room was an answer to a specific, deadly question posed by siege warfare. How do we eat? How do we drink? How do we escape? How do we outlast? The city's survival depended not on thicker walls above, but on deeper preparations below. It transformed its greatest vulnerability, being trapped on a rock, into its ultimate strength by ensuring that within that rock lay everything needed to endure. Orvieto teaches us that sometimes the most brilliant engineering isn't about defying a threat head-on, but about designing around it, creating hidden circuits of life that flow undisturbed even as the world above falls silent. The shadow of nuclear winter gave birth to a city of perpetual twilight. Beneath the ancient hutongs and modern boulevards of Beijing lies the Dixia Cheng, a sprawling labyrinth of tunnels and chambers built not for emperors but for everyone. Constructed in the 1970s at the height of Cold War tensions, this is a 20th century echo of the same desperate impulse that carved Derinkuyu and Orvieto. Its scale is almost beyond comprehension, a network designed to shelter up to 6 million souls from a cataclysm that never came. Here, the existential threat was not a marauding army or a prolonged siege, but the instant total annihilation promised by atomic warfare. The response, however, was strikingly familiar. This was not a simple bunker, it was a fully realized metropolis in waiting. Blueprints show spaces allocated for hospitals with operating theaters, schools for children who might grow up without ever seeing the sun, granaries stocked with provisions, and even recreational spaces like cinemas and theaters to maintain morale during an indefinite confinement. Workshops, water reservoirs, and power generators were all integrated into the design, aiming to create a sealed, self-sufficient world that could endure for months. This parallel is what makes Dixia Cheng so profoundly instructive. It proves that the drive to excavate our salvation is not confined to the ancient world or to pre-industrial societies. When faced with a perceived end, whether from spears and swords or from intercontinental missiles, human ingenuity follows a remarkably similar blueprint. Go deep, prepare for the long term, and replicate the structures of society underground. The tunnels of Dixia Cheng, many now sealed or repurposed for storage, serve as a chilling time capsule. They are a concrete manifestation of the global anxiety that defined an era, a monument to the fear that the greatest threat to civilization might come from the sky itself. Exploring this modern counterpart reframes our entire understanding of the ancient sites. It suggests we are not looking at historical curiosities, but at a recurring human archetype. The tools change from bronze picks to dynamite and concrete, but the foundational vision remains locked in place. If a society in the age of satellites and superpowers still felt the need to bury a city, what does that tell us about the timeless nature of existential dread? And if this modern maze now sits largely forgotten beneath a thriving capital, what does that say about the fragile line between urgent preparation and historical artifact? The silent corridors of Dixia Cheng ask us to consider what threats we would deem severe enough today to make us abandon the sun, and what kind of cities we might leave behind as evidence of our own fears. While Beijing's tunnels were a shelter for the masses, another nation prepared a refuge for its mind. Deep under the English countryside in Wiltshire, buried beneath a quiet town, lies the Burlington bunker, a secret city with a single, staggering purpose. Built in secret during the 1950s and known officially as the Central Government War Headquarters, this was not a place for the public. It was a lifeboat for the state itself, a 35-acre complex designed to house the entire British government and military command in the event of a nuclear exchange. Its concrete corridors, stretching for miles, contained everything needed to govern a nation that might no longer exist on the surface. There were austere offices for ministers, a secure broadcasting studio to address a shattered populace, a hospital, dormitories, and even a canteen, all powered by massive generators and supplied with enough food and fuel for 3 months. The cataclysm it was built to withstand represents the ultimate, terrifying escalation of the threats we have seen: no longer invasion or siege, but total, instantaneous thermonuclear annihilation. The very air would be poison, the sky would burn, and the only conceivable sanctuary was a sealed world of reinforced concrete and artificial light. Standing in its echoing halls today, the bunker feels starkly different from the hand-carved chapels of Cappadocia or the salt sculptures of Wieliczka. There is no artistry here, only pure, chilling function. The walls are not adorned with reliefs, but with cables, pipes, and the faded labels of a bureaucratic machine frozen in time. Yet, this sterile environment creates the most direct philosophical link imaginable to our ancient theme. It proves, with cold 20th-century logic, that when faced with an existential end, the human blueprint remains eerily unchanged. The tools are different: dynamite and diesel generators instead of bronze picks and oil lamps, but the foundational impulse is identical: go deep, replicate the essential functions of society. Preserve the core of your community, whether that community is a village of farmers or a cabinet of ministers, in a sealed environment that can outlast the hell unfolding above. Burlington forces us to reflect on the evolution of cataclysm itself. The ancient fears were of conquest, of losing land or faith. The modern fear, crystallized in the Cold War, was of losing everything, the very biosphere that supports life. The bunker is a monument to that specific, global dread. Yet by choosing the same ancient solution, it underscores a haunting refrain in human history. Our relationship with the ground beneath us is not just one of foundation, but of final refuge. When we imagine the ultimate threat, we still picture digging in, battening down, and waiting in the dark. This continuity is both sobering and strangely unifying. It asks us if the architects of Derinkuyu could walk the fluorescent-lit tunnels of Burlington, would they recognize the same desperate hope etched into the walls? The answer, written in stone and concrete across thousands of years, seems to be a silent, resounding yes. The desert itself can be a kind of cataclysm, a slow, unyielding pressure that demands total reinvention. In the sun-scorched hills of southern Tunisia, the Berber people of Matmata faced not an invading army, but an implacable, environmental foe. Here, the existential threat was the Sahara itself, with its searing daytime heat, frigid nights, and relentless scarcity of water. Their ingenious solution was not to hide from the world, but to harmonize with it in the most direct way possible by building within the earth. They did not carve a single, vast fortress, but instead created a sprawling community of individual courtyard homes, each one a masterpiece of passive climate control. The method was beautifully simple yet profoundly effective. A large square pit, sometimes 10 meters deep, was excavated straight down into the soft ground. From the walls of this sunken courtyard, rooms were then tunneled horizontally outward, creating a cool, shaded living space sheltered from the extremes above. This architecture is a direct conversation with the environment. The thick earthen walls provide immense thermal mass, absorbing the cool of the desert night and slowly releasing it throughout the blistering day, while deflecting the sun's most intense rays. Temperatures inside remain remarkably stable, a life-saving contrast to the surface. This was not a temporary refuge for a season of war, but a permanent, sustainable adaptation to a permanent, harsh reality. The entire landscape of Matmata, with its hundreds of these crater-like dwellings, forms a dispersed subterranean village, a community whose shared innovation was its survival. Their cataclysm was not a sudden event, but a constant condition, and their response was to build a comfortable, enduring life within it. This vision of underground living as a positive, integrated way of life captured the imagination of the world in a surprising way. The unique aesthetic of these sunken homes was famously used as the setting for Luke Skywalker's childhood home on the planet Tatooine in the original Star Wars film. This pop culture moment created a strange, poetic echo, linking a centuries-old Berber solution to desert survival with a futuristic fantasy of life on a desert planet. The connection is deeper than mere backdrop. It underscores a universal truth that resonates across time and even galaxies, that human ingenuity in the face of a harsh environment often follows a similar, sensible logic. Go where the temperature is stable, use the materials at hand, build with the climate, not against it. Matmata offers a crucial, different lens through which to view our journey. It proves that the drive to live underground is not always born from fear of a sudden disaster. Sometimes it is a rational, long-term strategy for thriving within a challenging but beautiful world. It shifts the narrative from one of desperate concealment to one of brilliant adaptation, asking us to consider what other sustainable wisdom is etched into the landscapes of our planet, waiting to teach us about resilience not as a reaction, but as a way of life. The Australian outback holds a town that turned necessity into a way of life. Coober Pedy is a community born from the glittering lure of opals and the brutal reality of a sun that makes the surface almost uninhabitable. Here, the cataclysm is the climate itself, an environmental extreme so severe that the most logical place to build a home is not on the land but inside it. Unlike the ancient defensive cities carved for secrecy, Coober Pedy is a modern, open declaration of subterranean living, a municipal-scale adaptation where the majority of the town's residents spend their lives in dugouts. The town began in the early 20th century when prospectors, desperate for relief from temperatures that can soar past 50 degrees Celsius, simply moved into their old mining claims. What started as a practical miner's hack evolved into a full-fledged underground society. Today, you can find not just homes, but churches with vaulted ceilings carved from the sandstone, hotels with cozy subterranean bars, shops, and even museums, all nestled within the Earth's cool embrace. This is the ancient practice of living underground, not as a historical relic, but as a viable, contemporary solution supercharged by modern technology. Where ancient builders used hand tools over generations, the residents of Coober Pedy use mechanical diggers and explosives to sculpt their living spaces in a matter of weeks, creating smooth-walled rooms with all the modern comforts. Air conditioning is often unnecessary, as the Earth naturally maintains a stable, pleasant temperature year-round. This makes Coober Pedy a living laboratory for the realities of subterranean life. The advantages are immediately clear: perfect climate control and dramatically lower energy costs. But the challenges are just as instructive, revealing the psychological dimensions of a life without a horizon. To combat the potential sense of confinement, many dugouts feature fake windows, elaborate trompe-l'oeil paintings of outdoor scenes lit from behind, or carefully constructed interior courtyards that bring a sliver of open space and natural light deep into the home. Some residents create lush indoor gardens under skylights, a defiant burst of green in the beige underground. Coober Pedy proves in the most practical terms that the underground city concept is far from obsolete. It is a direct, logical response to a specific, extreme environment, demonstrating that when the surface becomes hostile, the human impulse to seek refuge below is not a step backward, but a creative step forward. This thriving town asks us a compelling question: if we can build comfortable, connected communities beneath a desert, what other extreme environments on Earth, or perhaps beyond it, might be made livable through the same simple, profound logic of going underground? The rock itself became an act of faith. In the highlands of Ethiopia, King Lalibela commanded a miracle not of construction, but of extraction. In the 12th and 13th centuries, artisans did not build upward with stone, but prayed downward into it, carving 11 breathtaking churches directly from the living volcanic rock. Each structure was created by first trenching a deep, rectangular pit around a single, massive block of stone, then painstakingly hollowing it out from the inside to form windows, doors, columns, and vaulted sanctuaries. The result is a sacred landscape that feels both monumental and hidden, a sunken city of devotion. While these are among the world's greatest religious monuments, their design reveals a second, more pragmatic purpose. The cataclysm here was a shifting political and religious landscape, marked by the expansion of neighboring powers and periods of internal conflict that threatened the stability of the Christian kingdom. In response, the complex was engineered as a spiritual fortress. The churches are not isolated, but linked by a labyrinth of narrow, carved tunnels, drainage channels, and hidden passages that weave beneath the surface. During times of danger, pilgrims, priests, and even communities could move between places of worship entirely unseen, protected by the very earth that embodied their faith. Some churches feature deep, protective trenches, while others have hidden chambers and secure storerooms, suggesting the site could sustain its inhabitants during a crisis. This fusion is what makes Lalibela so profoundly unique. It represents the seamless merging of sanctuary, worship, and fortress. The drive for spiritual transcendence and the need for physical security became one and the same impulse, carved into a single piece of rock. The underground passages were not just escape routes, they were processional ways, transforming a necessary retreat into a sacred journey. This duality challenges a simple separation between the practical and the profound. Here, seeking refuge was itself an act of devotion, and the architecture of survival became the architecture of the divine. Lalibela's enduring power, still an active pilgrimage site after 800 years, reminds us that these underground spaces often held a significance far beyond mere shelter. They were repositories of identity, vessels for the most deeply held beliefs of a culture. When the world above grew unstable, they descended not just into safety, but into the very heart of their meaning, finding strength in the depths that was both physical and spiritual. If stone can be made to breathe with such purpose, what other hidden sanctuaries hold the silent prayers of those who sought protection within the earth? The desert teaches that water is not just a resource, but a secret to be kept. In the rose-red cliffs of Petra, the Nabatean civilization mastered this principle, creating a city that is a monument to surface grandeur, built upon a foundation of hidden, underground genius. While its temples and tombs are carved into the open air, Petra's true lifeblood flowed unseen. In a landscape defined by scarcity, the Nabateans engineered a subterranean network of water controls so advanced it borders on alchemy. They carved channels into the cliff faces to capture every precious drop of seasonal rainfall, funneling it through a labyrinth of ceramic pipes and rock-cut tunnels into vast, hidden cisterns buried deep within the city's core. This was not a simple collection system. It was a managed hydrological landscape, a secret infrastructure that could store enough water to sustain 20,000 people through years of punishing drought. The cataclysm Petra was designed to withstand was twofold: the slow, environmental pressure of an arid world and the sudden, human threat of military siege. An army could surround the city's towering cliffs, but it could not poison a spring, it could not find or cut off a water supply sealed inside the mountain itself. This mastery of the subsurface transformed a vulnerable desert outpost into an impregnable fortress. Even the city's breathtaking entrance, the Sick, is a feat of defensive geology. This narrow, winding canyon, with walls soaring 80 meters high, acts as a natural funnel. Any invading force would be forced into a single file line, utterly exposed, with no room to maneuver, making the approach itself a deadly gauntlet. Petra's lesson is crystalline. Survival in an extreme environment did not always require a full retreat underground. Sometimes it demanded a strategic partnership with the rock, using its hidden spaces to secure the one element that meant the difference between life and desolation. The Nabateans did not just build a city in the desert, they built a desert that worked for the city by locking its most vital resource away in a stone vault. This principle of securing water in the deep earth echoes through every site on our journey, from the wells of Orvieto to the cisterns of Derinkuyu. It reveals a universal truth in the architecture of survival, that controlling what flows beneath often meant controlling the fate of everything above. A different kind of sanctuary was carved into the basalt cliffs of the Deccan Plateau. The cave complexes of Ellora and Ajanta are not cities of refuge for the masses, but profound retreats for the mind and spirit, their very isolation becoming a canvas for some of humanity's most sublime artistic achievements. Created over a span of more than 1,000 years, these 34 caves at Ellora and 29 at Ajanta were not built, but painstakingly subtracted from the living rock by generations of monks, artisans, and devotees. Here, the cataclysm was not an invading army or a natural disaster, but the relentless churn of political change and social upheaval that swept across ancient India. For Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain communities, the surface world could be a distracting, even dangerous place for deep contemplation and the preservation of sacred knowledge. Their answer was to turn inward, literally carving out stability from the heart of the mountain. The scale of this endeavor is almost meditative in its ambition. At Ellora, the pinnacle of this rock-cut architecture is the Kailasa temple. Imagine not constructing a towering monument, but starting at the top of a cliff and carving downward, freeing a freestanding, multi-story temple complex from a single, gigantic block of stone. Workers removed an estimated 200,000 tons of rock, not by adding blocks, but by the disciplined removal of everything that was not the temple. This negative space creation is a powerful metaphor for the monastic life itself, a stripping away of the worldly to reveal a sacred form within. Meanwhile, at Ajanta, the caves are celebrated for their breathtaking frescoes. In the flickering light of oil lamps, artists covered walls and ceilings with intricate paintings depicting the life of the Buddha, royal processions, and scenes of everyday ancient India, creating a silent, illuminated library of color and narrative that survived for centuries precisely because it was sealed away from sun and storm. These spaces served a dual, brilliant purpose. They were monasteries providing secluded living quarters, prayer halls, and libraries for scholarly communities. But they were also shelters, their very inaccessibility offering protection during periods of regional conflict. The caves provided a stable, cool environment ideal for preserving delicate palm leaf manuscripts and painted plaster, safeguarding not just people, but the accumulated knowledge and artistic heritage of entire traditions. This shifts our understanding of the underground refuge in a vital way. Ellora and Ajanta demonstrate that survival is not solely a physical equation. In times of turmoil, preserving culture, philosophy, and art is itself an act of defiance against oblivion. These caves challenge the notion that such spaces were only for emergency habitation, instead presenting them as deliberate, long-term incubators for civilization's highest ideals. The monks and artists who worked here were building a different kind of fortress, one whose walls were painted with compassion and whose pillars were carved with stories, ensuring that even if kingdoms fell above, the essence of their understanding could endure in the quiet dark below. What does it mean that some of our most vibrant art was created not in sunlit palaces, but in the lamplit depths of a mountain? It suggests that sometimes the best way to protect a light is to place it in a deep, sheltered niche where it can glow undisturbed for 1,000 years. The cliff itself became a shield. In the high desert canyons of what is now Colorado, the ancestral Pueblones engineered a breathtaking solution to a world growing increasingly precarious. Their answer was not to dig down, but to build into the vertical face of the earth, creating the intricate stone cities of Mesa Verde. Perched within vast, natural alcoves high on canyon walls, these are not simply villages built against a cliff. They are architectural extensions of the rock itself, functioning with all the strategic logic of a subterranean fortress. Constructed in the 1200s and 1300s, this monumental shift from open mesa tops to sheer cliffs speaks to a time of profound duress. The cataclysm here was a slow, compounding crisis, a convergence of environmental hardship and social pressure. Tree ring records tell a story of relentless, multi-decade droughts that would have devastated crops and strained water supplies to their limit. At the same time, evidence suggests increasing competition for dwindling resources, with the threat of conflict from neighboring groups becoming a persistent reality. Faced with these twin pressures, the ancestral Pueblones turned to the canyon walls, seeking shelter within the Earth's embrace in the most dramatic way possible. The genius of Mesa Verde lies in its seamless environmental adaptation. The massive, overhanging alcoves provided a ready-made roof, sheltering the dwellings from snow, rain, and the scorching summer sun. The builders then constructed multi-story towers, circular ceremonial rooms called kivas, and complex living quarters from sandstone blocks and mortar, fitting them perfectly into the contours of the rock. This placement was a masterclass in passive solar design. The south-facing orientation captured the low winter sun, warming the stone walls which then radiated heat throughout the cold nights. In the summer, the high angle of the sun was blocked by the alcove's roof, keeping the interiors remarkably cool. Every aspect of the design worked with the landscape, not against it, creating a climate-controlled habitat that conserved energy and maximized comfort in an unforgiving environment. Access was deliberately difficult, often limited to narrow footpaths and scalable rock faces, with ladders that could be pulled up, making the communities easily defensible against raids. Here, the principle of using the earth as a refuge is expressed not in tunnels, but in a vertical, sun-dappled sanctuary. It is a powerful reminder that the drive for security can yield architecture of stunning beauty and profound ingenuity. Yet the most haunting aspect of Mesa Verde is its silence. By the end of the 1300s, these magnificent cliff cities were completely abandoned. The reason remains one of North America's great archaeological mysteries. Was it the culmination of that prolonged drought, finally exhausting all options? Did social structures fracture under the strain? Or did a gradual migration toward more reliable water sources simply lead communities to new lands? The empty stone rooms hold no written records, only the quiet evidence of a people who adapted brilliantly until they could adapt no more. Their departure was not a failure, but a final chapter in a long story of resilience. Mesa Verde stands as a poignant testament to a society that, when pressed, chose to integrate itself into the very bones of the landscape. It expands our global theme, showing that the shelter of the earth can be found not only in deep pits or winding tunnels, but in the high, sheltered embrace of a canyon wall. This shared human impulse to seek safety within the world's solid forms connects the cliff dwellings of Colorado to the rock-cut churches of Ethiopia and the tough cities of Turkey, a universal architectural whisper across continents that sometimes the only way forward is to step back into the protective fold of the stone. The silence of Malta's limestone holds a different kind of echo. The Hal-Saflieni hypogeum is not a fortress for the living, but a sanctuary carved for eternity. This three-level labyrinth, hewn from the rock between 4,000 and 2,500 years before the Common Era, represents one of humanity's oldest and most profound architectural conversations with the underworld. Created over centuries with nothing more than stone, bone, and antler tools, its very existence rewrites our timeline of ambition. Here, Neolithic people executed a plan of staggering complexity, excavating downward to create halls, chambers, and niches that mirror the megalithic temples they built above ground. This was a deliberate inversion, a sacred counterpart to their sunlit world. The cataclysm it addressed may not have been an invading army or a drought, but something equally transformative. A profound shift in spiritual understanding or social structure that demanded a new kind of space for ritual and remembrance. The hypogeum served as a collective resting place where the remains of thousands were carefully laid to rest in communal pits and smaller side chambers, a practice suggesting a deep, shared connection to ancestors and the earth itself. But this space was far from silent. Its most haunting feature is its acoustics. Specific chambers, like the famous Oracle Room, are engineered to amplify and transform sound. A low voice spoken into certain niches resonates through the entire complex, creating a pervasive, otherworldly hum that seems to emanate from the stone. Researchers suggest this was no accident. It was likely designed to enhance ritual chanting or drumming, using the architecture itself to induce altered states of consciousness during ceremonies. The effect would have been overwhelming, a vibration felt in the bones, making the very earth seem alive and responsive. This acoustic mastery, achieved millennia before the science of sound was formally understood, points to a sophisticated knowledge passed down through generations of builders who listened to the rock as they carved it. While some theories propose the hypogeum could have served as a refuge during times of extreme scarcity or conflict, its primary purpose was clearly ceremonial. It stands as a powerful testament that the drive to shape the underground is not solely born from fear. Sometimes it springs from a deep spiritual imperative, a need to connect with forces believed to reside within the earth. The hypogeum is a city for the dead and the divine, a monument to the idea that the most significant journeys might be those taken inward and downward. Its echoing chambers ask us a fundamental question: what does it mean that some of our earliest monumental architecture was not built toward the heavens, but carved with reverence into the dark heart of the world? This Neolithic complex proves that long before empires rose and fell, humans were already mastering the depths, seeking meaning and connection in the silent, resonant spaces below. The desert sands guard secrets with a patient silence. Scattered across the vastness of the Syrian desert, far from the well-trodden paths of Cappadocia, lie the haunting remains of little-known underground cities, silent companions to the famous dead cities of Bara and Sergilla. These surface ruins, with their empty basilicas and hollowed-out homes, tell only half the story. The full narrative of survival extends downward, into multi-story complexes carved with precision into the soft limestone bedrock. Dating to the Byzantine period, these subterranean settlements were not crude burrows, but carefully engineered environments. Archaeologists have documented sophisticated ventilation shafts that pierced upward to the surface, ensuring a steady flow of air to the deepest chambers. They built intricate water collection and storage systems, capturing every precious drop in a landscape defined by scarcity, turning the earth itself into a cistern. The communities who carved these spaces were primarily Christian, and the cataclysm they faced was the relentless, grinding pressure of history itself, the seismic shifts of empires, and the waves of religious persecution that followed in their wake. As Persian conquest swept through the region, and later as new Islamic empires established control, these communities found themselves caught in a changing world where their faith and way of life were under threat. Their response was a profound and practical retreat. They did not abandon their surface towns immediately. Instead, they created a hidden counterpart beneath them, a secure basement to their world where life could continue when the surface grew too dangerous. This duality is key. People likely lived in their sunlit homes during times of peace, tending vineyards and olive groves, but at the first sign of approaching armies or unrest, they could vanish, sealing themselves into the cool, dark safety of their underground mirror image, sustaining themselves for months on stored grain and secured water. The tragedy of these Syrian desert cities is that they remain a vast, forgotten chapter. Modern geopolitical conflict has made sustained archaeological study difficult and often impossible, leaving these sites largely unexcavated and their full stories locked in the dark. They stand as poignant reminders that our historical map is incomplete. For every celebrated site like Derinkuyu, there are likely dozens, perhaps hundreds, of similar refuges lost to time or still hidden beneath the drifting sands. Each one represents a community's desperate hope, a collective decision to preserve their identity by literally burying it. Their existence whispers a powerful truth about the ancient world. This pattern of digging in was not a rare anomaly, but a widespread, logical response to existential threat. The very fact that this blueprint emerges independently in the Syrian desert, in Turkey, in Italy, and beyond suggests a shared human instinct. When the horizon brings danger, the only safe direction is down. These silent complexes challenge us to wonder what other testaments to resilience lie undiscovered, their stories waiting for a time of peace to finally be heard. Beneath the grand boulevards and sunlit port of Odessa lies a shadow city of staggering scale. The Odessa catacombs are a sprawling, chaotic labyrinth, a network of tunnels stretching over 2,500 kilometers, making it one of the most extensive urban underworlds on the planet. Its origins were purely industrial, a byproduct of the intensive limestone mining that built the elegant city above. For decades, workers simply quarried the stone, leaving behind a honeycomb of empty, unmapped passages. This changed with a terrifying suddenness in the 20th century. The cataclysm here was the brutal reality of modern total war, the swift and overwhelming invasion of Axis forces during World War II. As the surface world was violently overtaken, the abandoned mines were instantly reimagined. They were no longer empty quarries, but the only viable sanctuary for Soviet partisan fighters and civilians desperate to evade capture. Without a single architectural plan, this accidental space was forced to become a functioning city for resistance. The adaptation was raw and immediate. Groups carved out living quarters inside chambers, established hidden field hospitals to treat the wounded, and created secret arsenals for smuggled weapons and supplies. Ventilation became a matter of life and death as they sought out natural air currents and carved new shafts to avoid detection by the telltale smoke of their small fires. The catacombs provided the perfect stage for guerrilla warfare, a terrain the occupying forces feared to enter. Narrow, twisting passages known only to the partisans became deadly traps for enemy patrols, while hidden exits allowed fighters to emerge, strike, and vanish back into the earth like ghosts. This spontaneous transformation is a powerful, direct echo of the most ancient behavior on our journey. It mirrors exactly how early human communities would have first utilized natural cave systems, repurposing what the earth provided into a scaffold for survival. The tools and the scale were modern, but the fundamental human calculus was prehistoric. When the structured world above collapses into chaos, the disordered darkness below becomes a space for reorganization, for holding a line, for preserving a spark of identity against annihilation. The Odessa catacombs stand as a stark 20th century testament to the timeless utility of the underground. They prove that the strategic value of such spaces is not locked in the ancient past. When surface civilization fails, whether to a medieval siege or a mechanized army, the underworld remains a constant, offering a brutal but effective theater for resilience. This labyrinth, born from industry and baptized in conflict, is a dark mirror. It reflects the same desperate ingenuity seen in Cappadocia or the Syrian desert, but played out with rifles and radios, reminding us that the geography of Refuge is written not in any era's technology, but in the unchanging human need for a place to make a final stand. The rock does not always demand a full retreat. In the sun-drenched gorge of Andalusia, the town of Setenil de los Bodgas has perfected a different kind of embrace. Here, the streets flow like a river beneath a ceiling of solid stone, where houses are not built under the cliff, but within its very body. The overhanging lip of the gorge becomes a permanent, majestic roof, with whitewashed walls constructed to meet it, creating a seamless fusion of human dwelling and ancient geology. This is not a sealed fortress hidden from view, but a town that proudly wears its shelter, an open-air demonstration of living in harmony with the Earth's own architecture. The cataclysm addressed here is environmental, a dual threat written into the very location. The deep river gorge offered a solution to the region's scorching summer heat, as the massive rock provides natural insulation, keeping the narrow streets cool and shaded. Yet, the same river that carved the gorge could also become a danger during sudden, heavy rains. Building directly into the rock walls elevated above the riverbed provided a strategic defense against potential flooding, a permanent residence designed with the rhythms of both sun and storm in mind. The town's origins stretch back to Moorish rule in Spain, with its name hinting at a history of vineyards and wine cellars, or bodgas, likely carved into the cool rock. This longevity proves its design is not a novelty, but a time-tested adaptation. Setenil represents a profound philosophical variation on our journey's theme. It asks, why hide from the elements when you can partner with the stone? The community chose not to disappear underground, but to integrate itself into a ready-made shelter, blurring the line between the natural world and the built environment in the most literal way possible. Walking its most famous street, the Calcuvas del Sol, you are simultaneously outdoors and enclosed, with the sky reduced to a brilliant sliver between the cliff top and the building fronts. This creates a unique sensory experience, a constant awareness of the protective mass above. Setenil challenges the binary of surface versus subsurface living. It presents a third way, a model of permanent, exposed yet sheltered habitation that has sustained a community for centuries. It shows that the impulse to use the earth for protection can result not in a secret labyrinth, but in a vibrant, sunlit town where the cliff face is your neighbor and the bedrock is part of your home. This beautiful blurring of boundaries offers a hopeful counterpoint, suggesting that resilience does not always require total separation from the world, but can be found in a clever, enduring fusion with it. What other ingenious adaptations lie in plain sight, where communities have turned the landscape itself into a living, breathing form of shelter? The true scale of Cappadocia's underground world only becomes clear from a bird's-eye view. Stepping back from the individual marvels of Derinkuyu and Kaymaklı reveals a far more ambitious reality. these were not solitary fortresses but vital nodes in a hidden, regional nervous system. Recent geological surveys and ground-penetrating radar have begun to map a staggering truth. Hundreds of distinct underground settlements are silently linked by a web of tunnels, some running for kilometers between them. This transforms the entire Cappadocian landscape from a collection of independent sites into a single, vast subterranean territory, a coordinated network designed for a cataclysm so pervasive it required an alternative geography. The threat was not a single army that could be waited out, but a prolonged era of insecurity where the surface itself became a contested, dangerous space for generations. The response was to weave a new map below it, one where safety lay in connection and mobility. Imagine the logistics of such an endeavor. This was not a project overseen by a single king or emperor, but likely a cooperative effort among many communities who shared a common existential threat. They would have needed to agree on tunnel routes, maintain secret entrances, establish protocols for movement, and perhaps even create a shared system of signals or messengers. How did they govern this sunless realm? While no written records survive, the architecture itself offers clues. The presence of large communal spaces, standardized defensive features like rolling stone doors, and the careful management of air and water suggest a high degree of social organization and mutual agreement. Trade and communication in this lightless world would have relied on memory, trust, and a profound familiarity with the labyrinth. Essential goods like oil for lamps, specific tools for maintaining the soft rock, and perhaps even specialized foods could have moved along these hidden highways, sustaining a dispersed population entirely cut off from the world above. This systemic view forces a dramatic shift in our understanding. We are no longer looking at desperate hideouts, but at the skeleton of a parallel civilization. It represents a societal commitment to the depths so complete that it redefined the concept of community. Your neighbors were not just in the rooms next door, but potentially in a settlement 5 kilometers away, connected by a pitch-black passage known only to a trusted few. The staggering long-term planning this implies digging tunnels that might only be used in a dire emergency, maintaining them across centuries, and teaching their secrets to each new generation speaks to a culture that measured time in eras, not in seasons. This network perspective challenges the very notion of what constitutes a city. Was Cappadocia's true capital not any surface town, but this interconnected, resilient web beneath the soil? The silent tunnels hold the answer, suggesting that when faced with an unending storm, the most profound act of resilience is not just to build a single strong roof, but to quietly weave an entire world safe from the weather. The echoes of those ancient tunnels resonate in the concrete and steel of our own century. Modern engineers tasked with securing data against disasters or carving subway networks beneath megacities often arrive at solutions that feel hauntingly familiar. The fundamental challenges of moving air, managing water, and creating stable, livable spaces deep underground have not changed in 3,000 years, only the tools we use to solve them. Specialists in sustainable architecture now actively study sites like Derinkuyu and Matmata, not as ruins but as textbooks. They analyze the passive ventilation shafts that maintained fresh air without a single watt of electricity, and the way thermal mass in earthen walls naturally regulates temperature, principles that are being adapted into cutting-edge, energy-efficient buildings today. This is not nostalgia, it is a pragmatic dialogue across millennia where ancient empirical wisdom validates modern scientific modeling. The cataclysms that drive this conversation have evolved, yet they share a common scale. We now look to a horizon shaped by climate volatility, the potential for global health challenges, or even the remote but real possibility of planetary-scale events. In response, the concept of the underground city has been re-evaluated through a lens of futurism and resilience. proposals for subsurface habitats are no longer just for war, but are seriously considered for long-term sustainability on Earth and as the foundational technology for living on Mars, where the subsoil provides essential protection from radiation and temperature extremes. This continuity reveals a profound truth. These ancient complexes are far more than archaeological curiosities. They are enduring blueprints. They teach timeless lessons about communal planning and meticulous resource management, showing how a society can function when every drop of water and every breath of air must be accounted for. Perhaps their deepest lesson is psychological, a testament to the fortitude required to redefine sanctuary, to find community and purpose when the open sky is no longer a gift but a threat. The stone doors they rolled shut were not just barriers, they were statements of profound hope, a belief that a future was worth preserving in the dark. As we face our own uncertain horizons, their silent, carved halls ask us what we would choose to protect and how deeply we would be willing to dig to ensure it endures. The stone doors sealed out more than just enemies, they sealed in an entire society facing its greatest test. For months on end, the world shrank to the flickering circle of an oil lamp. The air carried the scent of damp earth and pressed humanity, and the only sunrise was the communal decision to light another wick. This psychological landscape is the final, and perhaps most profound, frontier of these underground cities. Historians note that the true cataclysm was not only the threat above, but the silent, creeping pressure within, a battle against despair, disorientation, and the unraveling of social bonds. To survive physically was one feat, to survive mentally as a coherent community was another. Without the sun's reliable arc to structure the day, these societies had to invent new rhythms. The marking of time likely became a sacred, communal ritual. Specific hours might have been signaled by the changing of guards at air shafts, by scheduled communal meals, or by the sounding of a simple instrument. Prayer cycles observed in dedicated chapels or carved niches would have provided a spiritual framework, dividing the endless dark into manageable portions of devotion and reflection. These practices were not mere routine, they were psychological anchors, creating predictable order in a world where chaos loomed just beyond the rock. Social dynamics would have been intensely magnified under such pressure. In the tight quarters, every dispute, every shared hardship, every moment of cooperation carried greater weight. The community's survival depended on strict social contracts and the equitable distribution of scarce resources like clean water, lamp oil, and the most precious commodity of all, hope. Leadership would have been crucial, likely falling to elders or spiritual figures who could mediate conflicts, maintain morale with stories and doctrine, and reinforce the collective purpose. Psychologists studying group behavior under extreme stress suggest that shared rituals and a strong, unifying narrative are critical for maintaining cohesion. In the deep dark, the community's story, their reason for being there, would have been told and retold, transforming from history into a kind of mythic fuel for endurance. This might explain the presence of so many spiritual spaces underground. Faith provided not just solace, but a framework for meaning, a way to interpret their suffering as part of a larger, divine plan rather than random horror. The management of primal fear and the strain of confinement would have been a constant, quiet struggle. The ever-present possibility of a tunnel collapse, the fear of being discovered, the sheer weight of the mountain overhead, these pressures could fracture individual minds. Communities likely developed subtle, ingrained practices to manage this. The careful maintenance of ventilation was not just physical, it was psychological, a fight against the stifling feeling of being buried alive. Creating beauty, however small, became an act of defiance. A simple carving on a wall, a pattern woven into a blanket, a familiar song sung softly in a chapel. These were affirmations of identity and normalcy. They declared, "We are still here, we are still human, even in this." The very act of preserving daily rituals like grinding grain, teaching children, or tending to the ill became a powerful rebuttal to the chaos outside. These were not people waiting to die, they were people insisting on living, on carrying the full tapestry of their culture into the future, one guarded breath at a time. This psychological dimension adds immeasurable depth to the silent stone. It reminds us that these were not just shelters of rock, but sanctuaries of the human spirit, where every carved step, every storage jar, every fresco in the lamplight was a victory in the most intimate war imaginable, the war against the dark inside the self. The rolling stone doors of Derinkuyu and the nuclear age tunnels of Beijing are not isolated marvels, but chapters in a single, stunning story written in stone. From the sunken courtyards of Matmata to the cliffside sanctuaries of Mesa Verde, these 20 massive underground cities form a global testament to human foresight and an unwavering will to survive. They prove that when faced with existential threats, be it a conquering army, a decades-long drought, or the shadow of a mushroom cloud, our ancestors did not merely endure. They engineered entirely new worlds, choosing to reinvent life within the protective embrace of the earth itself. This shared blueprint, emerging independently across continents and millennia, speaks to a profound and universal instinct. In the face of a cataclysm, the most logical direction is often down. These are not mere holes in the ground, but monuments to cooperation on a staggering scale. The interconnected networks of Cappadocia, the communal layouts of Kaymaklı, and the shared spiritual spaces of Lalibela all whisper the same truth: survival was a collective project. It required a social contract etched not on parchment, but in the very layout of tunnels and chambers, a silent agreement that the community's future was worth the labor of generations who might never see the sun again. This long-term thinking challenges our modern pace, reminding us that true resilience is built not in a season, but across centuries, with each stone placed for the benefit of those yet to come. As we navigate our own modern uncertainties, these silent cities beneath our feet offer timeless lessons. They teach us about innovation born from necessity, showing how passive ventilation and thermal mass can achieve what our own technology often overcomplicates. They remind us of the psychological strength required to maintain hope and identity in prolonged darkness, and the cultural imperative to preserve art, faith, and knowledge even when the surface world trembles. Their legacy is a quiet reassurance that human ingenuity, when coupled with communal purpose, can find a way forward even when every horizon seems closed. History, we often forget, is not always written on the surface. Sometimes the most profound stories of who we are and what we are capable of are hidden in the depths, patiently waiting to be rediscovered. If this journey beneath the earth has captivated you, there are countless more mysteries waiting. Share in the comments which underground city fascinated you the most, and subscribe to continue exploring the greatest enigmas of our past together.